당주 취 전반에서 고묘도 미바디 다 셈다 셈조다 는 수마인 비기 취다 두시에다 는 지가 두시라 소바 되네라 미제 되네 라지 친이 이 따로 고묘도 는 셈지릭 뇨모버릭 차사 뇨모 방자이 마고 와다 되네기 뇨모버 릭디 되네기 방지 님보디 네 가르가리 마고 와지 되네 하고 해도 안 되네 안 돼양 님보디 방지 나네 조디 네 요아디 가서 뇨모바디 차상 조 요아디 다신세디 마리파텔 용고요 바다 엔데수기 님보디 뇨모바랑 수지 님보치 데 님보 조디다 다음에 보도 베시랍 공바 공고두스 디다 나서 타르바토비에게 탑람 조디데 인디레샤선 하고젠 디수공고레세제 저기 최전반에서 건배 한날 남들라 죽수 되네서는 안 지시사와지.
Good afternoon. This morning we are looking at the close placement of mindfulness on phenomena. We saw that whilst phenomena usually refers to everything that exists, here it refers to everything that exists apart from what has been covered before within the observed objects of body, feelings and mind. And in particular, it refers to consciousnesses, mental factors, such as discrimination and intention and contact, but in particular, also the mental factors that are the afflicted minds, which are to be abandoned. And we spoke about how the afflicted minds have as their root the ignorance of self-grasping. And these are all to be abandoned. And how so? Through cultivating the completely pure phenomena. There are antidotes. And the antidotes are of two types. Those which are temporary, serve as temporary antidotes to the suppression of the afflictions, and that which serves as the actual antidote to all the afflictions, the actual antidote which is towards the root cause of all the afflictions, and that actual antidote is the wisdom realizing emptiness. This then, in brief, is what we looked at this morning.
나디나 내가 지사 당한 저 템바시 냠는 제비기 동아 템바 다 류템바녀자 공부 동아 템바 하고야 다 안에 최 가서 초와 템바녀자 공부에 안에 군주 템바 하고야지 디니디 류템바녀자다 초와 템바녀자 니고면도 안에 동아 템바다 디규 군주 템바 하고요도 안에 가려운 것은 저게 템바시 스마나 동아 템바도 군주 템바인데서 하고요로 대하고 요도 데라 타르도게디 네 삼바 데레 마타는데 탑민도 대봉고도 선배 삼바 삼로디 기용으로와 데네 고데 가서 고 최점반이야 고명 가서 초점바 셈점반이야 고명도 안에 가르 고고세네 뇽 군주된베게 조 다시 마리바디 안에 록셰임바 도야다 디빵비 빵바 빵보고 된세 토기여바디 하고도 거래 디하고도 고된제 데네 하고도 다디 고된 토기여바이나 디 토비하게 토지가 람디 아니 가르스 토고 빵 람가르스 곰고레 셰여도 다 빵야라 뇨모바디게 빵고제 빵지게 탑 람딜라 조다 조 뇨모베 님보디 안 다신 담에도 비셔라레 시사 담에도 비셔라디야 유 담에 발 미네 띵이진 신의 주비하다 디디네 셔라 하동기 시라 송제기 공바 공별로디다 조디레샤세 디공고구도세 디고미야 고미야다 다 대단 념도 다 진바다 주름 쇠발라 소바 어두스네 아주 고미야디 냠면지야디 레어디다 람데녀슬렘 바세 템바시나네 냠슬 템바 차고레 지산디네잠 어디 대디 내가 저기 람기디 냠는 제벤 람 수저지 냠는 제벤나 디시디나 제시쇼 차지로 왔다가 장한테 람님네 제 고미야 조티 아니 다음에 봐 동반이 미비게 당한 저게 네 동반이 미비 실라순데 고미야도 차고래 제가 실라순데 고미 조지 녀모 봐야라 다 대단님도 선남이 초사야디 진바다 수제나 쇠바다 네 전주 네 안디서 차거와 디네자 아주 sö남 소다 이시 소니 송제 검제는 탈바톱나리 상교고 톱나디 디니 송제 검는 로고 봐자 안데 야자 람냠는 제야들라 다조 다음에 보도 베셔라다는 sö남이 소다 이시 소니가 차되더라 송제스는 냠도 sö남이 소다 이시 소니 냠도 송제스는 냠 송세우라 실라 송제세의 냠도 동 지와 디나제 송제스 냠도 시우라 직장자 곰되나 매라나 네가 곰고 그래서 그래 냠내 지 그래서 그러와
As we've gone through this outline on the purpose of this meditation, we've seen that the purpose is to engage in the practice of the Four Noble Truths. So the purpose of the training in the close placement of mindfulness is to be able to skillfully engage in the practice of the Four Noble Truths. We've seen how each of the observed objects relates to a specific a noble truth. So when the observed object is that of the body, through engaging in the close placement of mindfulness on the body, one engages in the practice of truth, or the practice related to true sufferings. And when one engages in the close placement of mindfulness on feelings, one engages in the noble truth of true origins. And it's through these two, seeing that resultant suffering comes from true origins, that one comes to give rise to a strong determination to be freed from cyclic existence, to attain liberation from suffering, liberation from samsara. Thereafter, through training in the close placement of mindfulness on the object of the mind, one sees that true cessation is possible, and true cessation itself is the abandonment of the afflictions together with their seeds. How to do so? Well, that is what we looked at this morning. Through practicing or training in the close placement of mindfulness on phenomena, one comes to see that it's thoroughly afflicted phenomena that keep us bound in cyclic existence, and thereby we need to cultivate their antidotal class, their completely pure phenomena. And here we saw that amongst the antidotes, whilst there are many that need to be trained in, which are temporary antidotes, one in particular needs to train in the actual antidote, which is the wisdom realizing emptiness. And this needs to be trained in to the point where one realizes emptiness with a union of calm abiding and meditative insight. And this is done in conjunction with other meditations such as generosity, ethical restraint, patience, and so forth. So what we saw here this morning is that amongst the various mental paths that those who have who are on the path of accumulation and higher, amongst the various paths they have achieved, the primary path that one strives to cultivate is that of the wisdom realizing emptiness, with the union of calm abiding and meditative insight. Because this is the true path, the noble truth of the path is this very realization. The wisdom realizing emptiness directly in union with, together with the union of calm abiding and meditative insight. And that is, and as one cultivates first the wisdom realizing emptiness, and thereby slowly conjoining it with calm abiding, and then later meditative insight in the union, at first with a conceptual and then a perceptual or direct realization, one is accumulating the accumulation of wisdom. Alongside this, one also accumulates merit, and this is done with practices such as generosity, ethical restraint, and patience. And in this way, one accumulates both wisdom and merit, these various mental paths, and bringing them eventually in union together as well.
다 람된 냠len 제데 고미야 조데 가서 람된 고미야 람 고미야 들 책으로 와다람 고미야 조데 다도 고텐세디 템바시네 고텐세디 토비자게 미율이 샤제 디 토비야게 돈달라 람 냠len 제레 다 메닝 아주 동아 템바도 군주님 바체 고텐디 토비야게 돈달라 얘네 미율이 샤제 디 토비야게 돈달라 아주 람 냠len 제 책으로 고미야 조데 롤야 주어다 조데 람디 아주 셈리 람 용어 규르제 아주 삼로디게 찾아 남용어 규야다 남용어 규르제디야 뉴바 차샤 따야게 베제 조어디 지체고 그러다 내내기 따베게 지 가르져서는 제일 대부 가르통어서 고된 냥데도 토야게 된다를 봐. 다 미니 동안 된바도 군주 된바니디 삼당과디 가르르 람나 제상 마우슬이야 람 냠는 제일 된다래 셈슈게 된다라. 제사 셈슈디 야고 하고는 델레 타고도 삼제 델레 타베 탑람 냠는 제데 셈슈 지 듬바드 마선도 슉철 줘야다. 되네 영화자 되네자 디 동안 된바 군주 된바니 신야디 람된 냠년 제라 셈슈 체다 듬바 쳐 줘야게 된다. 베즈 쳐 용해 된다는 거 저기 제화다. 저거당 저 가르제스는 덴바시 나네 냠는 제 고미하게 가르스는 가지고 삼로디 람냠 람기 고미야 차고로 와. 제상도 덴바시 제상당한테 전반 예제 시시여 되는 류전반에 셈라 초와 주님바시도 디나데 랑기 챙이네 지챙이 니 단어 곰시데 디나도 저다 지챙이 지챙이도 고미야죠. 지챙이 나네 다 다음에 봤어. 고미야디다 로 고미야게 다음에 봐도 로 고미야다. 데 디가라 근데 직 고미야 차고로 왔다가 저기 다 고미야도 디가서 람기 삼로디 람용어 마이 람용어 마주와디게 람용어 규야다. 람용어 규사와디게 야 뉴버차 다야다. 디츠도나르와다 고미야도 람디레도와.
The purpose of this meditation, the purpose of engaging in the four close placements of mindfulness is to train skillfully and successfully in the Four Noble Truths. And amongst the Four Noble Truths, primarily it is to engage in the cultivation and achievement of true paths. And in order to generate true paths, one has to give rise to the strong desire to achieve true cessations. So the objective or the goal of the training to cultivate true paths is to achieve true cessations. The stronger the wish one has to attain true cessations, the stronger one will strive to cultivate true paths. And in order to give rise to a determination to achieve true cessations, this comes about in dependence on training in true sufferings and true origins. And the more skillful and the deeper one's reflection on true sufferings and true origins, the stronger the yearning will arise within oneself and the determination to achieve true cessations. And in dependence on this, the strength of the determination to achieve true cessations, dependence on that will come about a corresponding strength of mind to engage in the cultivation of paths and eventually true paths. Moreover, as we saw in the previous outline, the way that one engages in this meditation on the four close placements of mindfulness is through, firstly, reflecting on the specific characteristic of the observed object, and then the general characteristics of the observed object. And amongst these two, general and specific characteristics, primarily one needs to train in selflessness. And as we saw repeatedly earlier, one needs to engage in reflection on the specific and all the general characteristics, but primarily one needs to train in selflessness, or cultivating the wisdom realizing selflessness.
lam nyamlen che 지사 lam nyamlen che de 한주기 파 lam nyamlen che de 지사 덴바시 나네 람된 냠len che de 조어를 차도로 지사다 디바 예와를 체샤나 양아주기 진바 수준 수바 존재 삼대 셰랍세 디둑들이 전유센백이 디 냠len che라 아니 파신두기 냠len 시고로 파신두기 냠len 시고래 년되다 란제디기 냠len 디드제의 진바 수준 수바 존재 삼대 셰라 냠len 데레 데는 진소둑 냠len 시아지 시고래 지사 디나네 냠네 진소 두게 냠네 나라 마디 비게다 다시 냠네 가르체나 요마다 가체 되네 장하는 저기 람림고 시비 갑라야 냠네 제스 송바이네 당가질에 냠네 저 조어디 가르치네 다 둥아데 베냐외 둥아 이다예 둥아 둥아 징안데 둥아 막 송산에 가질에 되네 둥아 시에도 둥아 될라 탈도게 삼바제 탈도게 삼바제도 아니 데 탈야 되나 가르 냠네 지워서네 짐버스르 저버스르 삼베 시랍 디루디 냠네 제고래 세승고래 다 냔되다 라질레 다 장유선발레네 근데 그 데니게 둥아 삼다 데네 셈장 탐지 둥아를 자고도 셈베 삼다야다 진짜 셈장 탐지기도 나 산제 고마 토고도 셈베게 장유선께야다 진짜 데니게네 안다 다 산제 고마 토비지도 가는 냠네 제고래는 진바 추르면 저버 전에 삼베 시랍 주디 냠네 제고 띵냠네 제고를 송고를 봐 진짜 데네자 추르듀셔네 진수 진바 가서 람냠네 제 세야디 파 직수 예와를 쳐는 진배냐로 추려냐로 수배냐 쩌냐 삼등 시랍 냠는 다 디죽티 차들어와 지자 람림 걸어스네 냐와 이당 안르 둥을 마셰네 다 디솔레 탈고구도 세 탈바 탐지집고 토고구레 숨거와 디토비아게도 안 가르쳐고래 람나 진배 냠네 제월 추제 냠네 쇠배 냠네 쇠네 냠네 삼대 냠네 제 셰럽 냠네 제고래서 디루디 냠네 제월 송고로와 장주선발에 심제 탐지기도 선조고마 토벌 제고도 심배 군노 장주선 계산에 가르 냠네 제고래서는 진배 냠네 추제 냠네 쇠배 냠네 쇠네 삼대 셰럽 냠네 제고래라로와 년도다 랑젤레제 디스 냠네 제고래라로와 다 제와 지망하서 제와 충위나 하다 미고바 토비치도네 토고고 디토베지도 가는 냠는 제월은 진배 냠는 제 추전 냠는 쇠배 쭌전 냠는 제월 송고로와 제가 냠는 제에게 차선 뒤나 진바 추전 쇠바 쭌의 선배 셰럽 냠는 날 뒤로 고로와 딘 자고로와
So again, the purpose of this meditation of the four close placements of mindfulness is to engage in training in the Four Noble Truths. And amongst the Four Noble Truths, the primary noble truth to engage in is that of true paths. Also then, if we look at the trainings that hearers and solitary realizers engage in, we'll see that their trainings are primarily or encompass generosity, ethical restraint, patience, joyous perseverance, concentration, and wisdom. And bodhisattvas, they engage in these same practices, conjoined with bodhicitta, and thereby are called perfections of generosity, ethical restraint, patience, joyous perseverance, concentration, and wisdom. And this is in accordance with the presentation that we are most familiar with, that from the graduated stages to enlightenment, the lama. There, through reflecting on the sufferings of the lower realms and thereafter the upper realms, and coming to see how suffering pervades cyclic existence as well as the origins of that suffering, practitioner gives rise to determination to achieve liberation, nirvana. And how to do so? Through engaging in the trainings of generosity, of ethical restraint, patience, joyous perseverance, concentration, and wisdom. Bodhisattvas too, through going through the same reflections and having generated bodhicitta, now for the welfare of all beings, they engage in the practices of generosity, ethical restraint, patience, joyous perseverance, concentration, and wisdom.
Dembashi Yamna Jesna Dina Sungora, Jana Lamringo Yamna Jesna de Sungora, and Dembani Yamna Lamna de Sungora, Dembani Yamna Jose, Dembani Lamna, Dunga Casore, Caso Dona de Bata, and the Kunzu Demba Sigura, Dona de Balade, Tomba Tobio, Tonya, Mibishila, Tomba Tobio, Yamna Jesura. The Kunzu Deba Yamna, the Kunzu Deba, Janjosem, Nije, the Jimba, the Sudus, about something Yamna Yitis, Kunzu Timbin, Jessegura, Tisadin Yamna Jet, the Dembani Yamna Chevalana. Passion Dukti Chatugore, and the man began on Lam Tapshin in Yamne Labne, and the Lam Tap Sherab Nis, the Sherab said, Don't buy you to be Sherab that did Shilasun Chagore. So then she tap said, Najimba the children of Zaba the children of some day Jamni, Janshu Semdi Chatugore. Just Lam Tapshin in Yamne Jesna, Ditsore, Jins of Passion to Yamne Dere, 다 지 뎀바시 냠나스나 진소 파주기 냠는 라도 고래 다지 람림 냠나스나 진소 파주기 냠네데 제사 냠는 가르체베나 디레 다지 나게 냠네지 나가 토네 나가 나가 냠네 지글름나 디마도 요 말에 냠는 제라 나가 가서 냠네 저 동반이 조 고미하다 안 될라 미비게는 지게 야라 제라야 완전 최고 부야다 아니 지네 최고 부야되기 진변냠나 차오로와 최고 부야 안 말씀자래야 아니 최셔야 안 직sem징이 동아세야 니냠네 제래 제사 디네자 냠네 제디 가르요라서는 디마도 요말 진바도 추저서바 전에 섬데 샤랍 죽디 차로 그래서 나게 냠네 제다 디레 고 냠네 제다 미더와다 냠는 집에 셰바 나로야 아니 차라다 디네 용구를 마도 제 나게 냠네 제다 디네 차고래 아니 파진 뒤에 냠네 지나 디레 세상 하나 그 상기기 숨비 취 간에 지면에 다 냠는 조나 디나 데네시마도 디나네 뒤로 그래 가르쳐베나 파신 주기 냠는 진소 주기 냠는 나를 뒤로 진소 주기 냠는 맞아봐 디나 마디베 냠네 제야지 파시파시 용어야 말해.
With the Four Noble Truths, we see that then that true paths is primary. Now, ever we divide true paths, whether it's into those of the heroes and solitary realizers or those of the bodhisattva, and whether we look at it from the perspective of the trainings here or of the lamrim, we see the concordance between them. And if we divide the paths in a different way, other than, say, in the lamrim division, but into, say, the paths divided into the Four Noble Truths or the two truths, we see that if we take the two truths, that of conventional truth and ultimate truth or final truth, then the paths relating to conventional truth will be bodhicitta, love, compassion, generosity, ethical restraint, and so forth. The paths of ultimate or final truth will be the wisdom realizing emptiness. So the same division of paths as before. Or if we divide paths into those of wisdom and method, those relating to wisdom will be the wisdom realizing emptiness. Those relating to method will be generosity, ethical restraint, patience, and so forth, bodhicitta. If you think of the tantric paths, these two can be divided, will comprise the same paths of wisdom realizing emptiness, and then those of generosity, such as making offerings to the deity, teaching the Dharma, and so forth. So what we see is that all practices are contained within these paths. There may be a difference in terms of subtlety, or whether the objective is liberation, individual liberation or enlightenment, but all practices are included within these six paths.
다된마 다디게 양지 공디 우다나리아 송요레체 다디나 우탈레스 냉엔레체 세규치르스 시치르다 마몬치르스 뎀바실라 죽자외 잠바냐샤 잠바냐와샤보고 시송베치르사.
Now returning to our text, the bottom of page 5. Here we come to the conclusion of this third outline, the purpose of this meditation on the four close placements of mindfulness. And this concludes with a quotation from Maitreya's discrimination of the middle and the extremes. Because of the appropriated negative state, because of the cause of craving, because of the basis, and because of non-confusion, you will engage in the Four Noble Truths through meditating on the four close placements of mindfulness.
나델리아 우다나로 소유돼 냉한린 치르시도 류자반야샤티시고 류자반야샤 콤베 아니 둥아덴발야 냠네 둥아덴비게 덴바신 둥아덴베 냠네 주고레스 가레라네 냉한린 치르시도 김세 냉한레시 아주 풍보디 냉한레시도 아니 체대게 둥아이 둥아다 규 둥아기 계기 땡지고레스 제가 냉한바 땡기 땡지고레스 안에 마음바나 깨와 치마에나 양아주기 땐 류텔레 때네 안에 같이 걸었으니 안에 녀모바지 녀모 레사용도 안에 깨와 마음베 깨와야 동아된비기 풍보디 수 양자 용야기 땐지 양자 용야의 규 gyudi sabeki tenchi gores, jazan lingo lembar chi gores, jazan nengale, jazan ngāzu pungpo di, ta denigi nengale, inza dedan Gyälwa tsedigi le dan kasore, dunga gyuyo dunga kiwi ten, maomba na, ane chike denigi dunga pungpo, yangke leki ten, jeba inza denigi ten jibiki, inza pungpo di, ane dunga ki rangi, deyang gyu karasin le dan nyumo wachunga za, le jungwa inza, te kola ya dunga yi rangi resi achi, ondo dunga shi rangi resi, di shebar jena komya di la, jizan lu chanpa nyecha komba inza, dela tene, kara hao sen dunga tenpa ta hao resi kore.
Looking at the first line, because of the appropriated negative state. So this relates directly to point 1 above, in that through meditating the close placement of mindfulness on the body, one comes to understand true sufferings. And one does so through understanding that our physical mental aggregates are appropriated in this negative state, meaning that they have been, these aggregates are a negative state because they are the basis upon which we experience suffering now in this life, and upon this the basis of this negative state, we will create the causes for further lifetimes of suffering, and will continue to remain bound in this prison of cyclic existence through repeatedly taking appropriated suffering aggregates. So in this way, one comes to realize true suffering.
다 세규 치를 세대 세배 규임 치를라 그래. 세배 규임 치를 세대 초화점만 예샤 시고래. 제상 초화대 될때 초화될 때네 가르치고 가서 초화대도 기용도 될 때네 가르치고는 세바기 그래서 제상 초화대와께나 대와데 대다 미라와스비게 세바기 동화기도 될라 자도게 세바. 제상 가서 초화 규라 초화께 될라 초화되게 때네 가르친 거라서는 초화녀자 잠반녀자 공명벽을 하고 그래서는 지상 초화될 때네 세바기여도 세비디 온게 가르치고 그래서는 레사 되네 레사는 레기 온게 안 가서기 동화 볼링도 와스 되네 장가서 세바디기 가서 초화디기 세바기 규치고 그래서 세바될 때네 레사고 레드는 코알기 그래서 지상 코알기 규디 저기 레다 뇽모 받을기 그래서 지상 아주 세바디기 초화될 레다 뇽모 받게 받지고 그래 지상 뇽모게 레사고 그래서 지상 되네 참 뇽모 받는 게 자와디 가르서는 세바기에 대한 아주 대화를 세바기에 대해 가르친 기워서는 나세 당보 나세 깨지 나진지 되네 나래 대화 구구도 세배당 나라 대화 구구라기도 초와 대화를 잡아기 그래 진짜 되네 나 지금 나라 템버도 받지 비tin 다도 받지면 다신디 안데 안가 저기 골위기 둥아이 규조 임바디 되네 하고도 그래 대하고 여도 다 둥아이 규조 군주된 바다고 그래 진짜 디하고에도 안디 방구도 되냐고 민도 선비게 다 균인 바다 통용을 제가 되네서 군주된 바하고 그래 군주된 발로 주고 그러지.
In the second part, because of the cause of craving. And then this relates to the second point above, that through meditating on the close placement of mindfulness on feelings, one comes to realize true origins. Through this meditation, one comes to recognize that in dependence on the arisal of feelings, craving arises. Craving, desiring attainment, or desiring attainment, or repulsion, craving to repulse something, push something away. And in dependence on this craving, contaminated karma is accumulated. In dependence on that, once again, rebirth in cyclic existence is attained. In this way, we continue to suffer. Moreover, one reflects here at a deeper level that craving itself is a result coming from a cause. And its cause is the I, the self, wanting happiness. And in dependence on the self wanting happiness, feelings of happiness, happy feelings arise, and then attachment. Or the self wanting happiness, then feelings of repulsion come, feelings of suffering unpleasant feelings come, then the attachment for the self wanting to be freed of this comes. So in this way, we come to understand true origins, and then the determination to be freed of these causes that only lead to suffering arise.
That in a she mitchers, she cheers down, see she mitcher like that chetamba, because same time by each other, same time by each other, same thing, so give on them be dado to but be she gores, she do, just same time by each other, same mean the dado to but single, the naked simbe, dado to but same. Me dado chuba zimbi ki zimba tela da sem kasora da se te kadis nangudu nawa nashi du da mindu cheba chege an dame ba to ru gore chisa dado chuba zimba di ani lo she ma do gore se te pangbi ge pangba yu pangbi go di yu ba de tong tu do tu gore se ne do yu chisa go den du gore che chisa shi chi se di ani sem de ma ni sha ti she che.
The next line, because of the basis, and then this relates to the third point above, that through meditating on the close placement of mindfulness on the mind, one comes to engage in true cessations. Here one recognizes that phenomena appear to exist truly or inherently, and then we grasp at them as existing in this way. We realize here that phenomena do not exist in the way that they appear, and therefore the consciousness that grasps at them as existing in the way that they appear is a wrong consciousness, it's an ignorance. And therefore, because it's a wrong consciousness and ignorance that keeps us bound in cyclic existence through grasping at phenomena as existing truly, we realize that that can be eliminated, that wrong consciousness can be eradicated, and therefore true cessations are possible.
Mamon chiru said the church and banjasha she or that church and banjaja combica lamdella juru said. So that Mamon chiru said the church and banjaja carahaguri and the church and banjaja comiodu, to give no more bada, and to do a shao condor and idea no more bache, this way rictige, you saw does a marik but Gyälwa hago. The negita, Dima, Pa Meba Suelia, Nimbo the Carudus, Courage and Bantu Lade. Just no more Basosora Paya, Jamba Comiada, and Ejike, Comiajic Mambu Benaneta, no more than so doesn't marm. Indeed, there's a new mobile chasa, the penetration condron, Aya, doesn't marry but chasa, and the Montbareshas, you la Momba, you Matopa, you la Montbares, you Montbare, Chesa Deji, Shogesheba Nashi, and Diso, and the Mutumbares, you Coronzu, you Nawanashi. Zimba did a nane mutumbares, course now on Haji, you corron the Zimba Naji, don't tell your mares, mutumbares, chick. And the answer to get the sugar carishes, and so sugar, Devatile, Devadugo, Duma Dugo Marina, Nyomo Batisula, Jebudi, Devadu Sabla, and Dunga lady, so Devat the mutumbe to Gores. Dunga Meba so gorte, did Deva the Dunga Meba so Deva yorte, did a mutumba Dunga the King Gores, just a mutumba said. And the ordinary, and then daily Mutumba said, showing out the Mutumba said, Karshawas, Papa Namjana, Papa Mutumba. Papa Namja Karshawas, no more but the Pamba to about it, just a no more but the Gyälwa to my never silver to words. Just a Papa Namji, Gyön Tungur, just a Dugo, then another Sosoki winner, to no more particular Gyön Mataji and then Dashi sometimes, just a Papa Namji Dele Gyön Tong, just a public Namna Mutumba essay. Those meeting by it, I didn't know more, but they how going with Asia. They how going on do, and they can spongure, said the lam yamnache udusta, lam yamnache pongad. They lam yamnet and so the culture that don't dame poto biggie, she loves on rigitopo comba loaded that Nimbo the onion the so diresha, she then decombo resin. Di lodida, rangu you, mola, mamon bares. Dame bato lodi yang rangi chö kana nesu mamong ba ko nesu jidawa shin dugo res de kompa ina ane mongba nyomo ba chasa pa dugo res chisa chi de dine lamla nyamna ji ru kombe ke ta bezu chi go res de chi je de lamde nyamna je bal ju ba res sa.
The line con- concludes with, and because of non-confusion. So here, this then refers to the fourth point immediately above, what we looked at this morning, that through training in the close placement of mindfulness on phenomena, one engages with true paths. And true paths, we saw in this presentation that here we come to recognize that our afflicted minds are thoroughly afflicted phenomena, in that they are thoroughly afflicted phenomena, and all of them have as their root the particular affliction of the ignorance of self-grasping. And it's because of the ignorance of self-grasping that all the other afflictions arise, contaminated karma is accumulated, and we continue to suffer. Moreover, within this meditation we recognize that not only can these be abandoned, and thereby true cessation is achieved, but it's through cultivating the completely pure phenomena that they will be abandoned. Completely pure phenomena are their antidotes. And there are a number of antidotes here which serve to temporarily overcome these afflictions. But the primary antidote to cultivate is against the root affliction of the ignorance of self-grasping, and that is the wisdom realizing emptiness, or the wisdom realizing selflessness. And so in this process, one comes to realize that the afflictions, or the thoroughly afflicted phenomena, are discordant. And discordant, here we can understand as confusion, in that there is confusion with regard to reality, confusion with regard to the attainment of our desired state of lasting, stable peace. Confusion in terms of how the afflictions engage with their objects, and that these afflictions are wrong consciousnesses because they engage with their objects in ways that they do not exist. They believe their objects to exist in a way that is discordant with how they do exist in reality. Moreover, there's confusion in terms of how one achieves happiness. Afflictions, and following the afflictions, one does so thinking happiness will be achieved, but the result is discordant from what one desires. Happiness is not achieved through following the afflictions, only suffering. So therefore, the result that is achieved is not concordant with our inner wish of lasting, stable happiness. Moreover, it's only Arya beings who have non-confusion, who are not confused. And they are not confused because they recognize the afflictions for what they are, wrong consciousnesses. So therefore, understanding this, we train in cultivating paths within our continuum. And amongst the various paths that need to be cultivated, the primary path to cultivate is the true path, which is the union of calm abiding and meditative insight with the wisdom directly realizing emptiness.
Dine gomyo de dine dembashila jukjaves Tamanyasha Komparcha, said Jina, Denigi Tambanyasha she gomyo de and debashili and Yamlesh Jugo, the Dienza, Tamanyasha Gomko Goba, Gimtendi, Dires, Debashilaniam, Debashiniam Nelle Jubichido, and Tamanyasha Gomgores at this mood.
Then the verse concludes with, you will engage in the Four Noble Truths through meditating on the four close placements of mindfulness. The way to engage in the Four Noble Truths is through the skillful technique of meditating on or cultivating the four close placements of mindfulness.
Tiziki dunga dimba dunga diki nyomomba da disu tiki ane papa da midun bare se papa namki karasin dunga inesu da ane chige dunga gyu kunju dibe nesu di gyu diki ngosum do tsarwa ngosum to ba inza dine papa namki dine 통화 be mase gyuen chenpo shu 통고를 받아 gyuen chenpo shu 통고래 제가 제상 알아주기 가르 통고라서는 교회 싫어 통투고 말에 빼네 공도로보다 되샤로보다 시대 알아주 공도디게 다 공도디게 교회로 되었을 텐데 그냥 공도라 연대지에 망고 통디고 알아주기 다 인지 미지 공도스 깨베네 빼지 공도 나와네 소소를 캐변 여바도 캐변 두투 여바 배제 땅한테 공도디 고고로 보지 삼고 땅 거를 빼네 딩으로 와다 알아주 디와지 지 디와 람카지 조데깔라 상가로다 되네 임바다 되네 지역에는 제 공을 나지 직반 직저진의 미사사 오데 시에제 파소 뒤에는 소스 좋아하게 남가되게 약을 해야다. 야데 칼라로 지는 상가라 되네 직 공으로 쉬우시라고 있는 공으로 사직 직계야 직직 넘되는 미사나되게 거기는 단일 당선 두스네 소스게 되나데 주투야로다. 안디네 되네 먼저 공으로 될래 되네 직 되네 소스 되나 먹고 주투고도 와스 제가 아니 지 파셔들이야 내가 기세였으면 아주 공로사 직직 넘유되는데 파셔를 파시에는 파줘야다 제가 송급 제투도 제가 아주 공로데 이제 매바서야게 방자리 민도 아주 공로데 비제다는 아주 캡사 약보를 해도 선비게 아주 삼나라 되네 고고로 와다 파저지 키로다 힘으로 소연데 배콩라제 찍찍 제베는 미로지는 콩라제 넘겨던데 깨라 접지 되네 라바데 되네 제베는 저르고로 봐 저지는 소설이야 안 송급 제투야 자기도 제가 되네서 소소 콩로디 고구도 제가 콩로디 소소게 되나 뭐 주투고도 선비게 삼는 안에 나는 삼나네 디코고래 제가 파바디게는捐修 지다 될라 두가지 민도 선비 통고를 나 저기捐디지 통통 걸어야 연대로 좀 먹고라 통디 거로와
This term confusion or non-confusion, concordant, discordant. It's good to think about this in the context that we are looking at here, that of true paths, where true paths are found in the continuum of Arya beings. It's Arya beings who can see just how discordant afflictions are with our desired state of happiness. It's Arya beings who have realized reality directly. So they can see vividly, with vivid clarity, the extent to which afflictions are faulty. We struggle to see the afflictions as even slightly faulty. For example, we can take anger. Perhaps now we're talking, we say, oh, anger is very bad, but when anger has arisen and taken control, we see this anger as our friend. We do not see anger at that time as being our true enemy. For example, if we're driving and someone cuts us off, anger arises for them. And we see this anger as justified because of what that person did. Or if we're about to eat something delicious, and then a fly lands on our food, or something happens that pollutes our desired food, immediately anger arises because what we wanted was obstructed. Or if we're walking along quietly, enjoying a lovely day, and a dog jumps out and barks at us aggressively, immediately anger arises with us, and we want to chase it away. So we see in these moments how we see even an obvious harmful affliction as anger, as a support, as our friend. Arya beings, on the other hand, those who have realized reality directly, know that there is nothing worse than their afflictions.
안디니 자 당하는 저기도 진에 콘트기 연전 통화제 콘트 되네게 지도 아 저기디나 디르와다 소소가 강아지다 디와지 미치 투디지 강아체야 소소 네베기서 삼산라 남상한조 콘을 거로 콘을 기거라 파셔도 콘 가르치 콘라서 아주 심딩 콘을 게 콜이야 마저 강아지게 숨겹이 된다로 콘을 거로 왔다가 지체거로 제가 디네리 디네 다 콘을 나와 디고 콘을 내가 주제 됐어서 펜바 용으로 와다 판도 연구를 가고 공공오버를 와 오버인자 판도 돼서 연구를 와 진짜 중세 판도 연구를 때 코로나에 내가 중세 판도에는 푸라 장다는 뭐 판도 친구요 말다 남사 니게 제보들라 안 소설에 뇌지마도 아니 판바데 돼서마도 매바래 되네 판바데 돼서 주비게 뇌견지 가르치 망반의 포기 나를 제보디 누가 먹을래 미차사게 오다 코코로서 코님을 제와 맞이해야다 안 코디지 지기어 말해야 되니까 소소를 근데 지게 강아 먹고시 안디 내가 그러나 판유데스 연구를 때 디기 제보들라 베네 지간 쪽에 칼라사사데 되니기 안지게 제호치리 쉬베나 다 미디게 마타마도 미디 콘라사고 슈로 코 칼라게 디나 코니엘 캔야 사고 야가디 코캔야 사고 진짜 미 콘라소버디 강아요다 딩아 저강 게마다선 제만에 게당 말와 진짜 되니기 내가 비네 소수 제보디 경 망보라 그래 아니 마음바나 삼다면 디기 아도 콘르디기 제보디기 아니 레 제보디 아니 아주 레군데 켈렘바이네 제와 치마이네 두어 마도 야야 말해 진짜 아 저기 파 포기하는 삼다 장다른 부에 삼다바이나 콘르디기 대식 판도 용 콘르기비 내가 야 되어서 판도 용 시기르데 이내양 디게 딜레 망아 강아실리고 그래지래 진짜 디네 상아도 콘르디 매봐서 그래지래 파관 남기 가르치고 그래서는 소수기 되나 주야라 가르스는 좀 변을 하바도 전시센바 파바로 신베이네 페니기 소수 되나 주야라 콩르디기 뇌기리에서 마음바나가서 라신니까라 강아테야마도 판도요 말했어 매바인자 델야 아니 주야들라 가두고래서네 잠바 잠제 공부래 잠제 공부래 델라 때는 공부하나 아니 라신니까라 판도요바 아니 디 판도디야 베 균링보 좀제 니버텨봐 준 거래서 디치거와 세상 안저 콩로서는 내가 때서 소설의 편도 용어는 파죠 샹달을 쉬우니로 그래. 진짜 디니 인자 저기 삼다외나 콩로들이야 지 디니게 연대로 통제 방자 말을람나 그 저기 균능보 삼 푸다링보 삼다외 편인들 때스랑을 때 판도 용시 바래 이내 샤는 요 망고 내가 다라는 샤는 망고 뉴고래. 대 판도 디기 콩로디게 제보들라 망고반의 소설이야 강하다 망아 시고지 용아 차고로와 균링아 마 강아야 차고래. 제가 디네 장아 저기디 내가 판다 청중 삼다지 코로나나 방자 말을람나 지고 말다.
As beginners, we still see the afflictions such as anger as a protector, in a sense as a refuge. And this is because when our wishes are obstructed, from deep within, this desire for what we want arises. And then, through anger, we think we're acting in a skillful way to protect ourselves, to protect the achievement of our wishes. And yes, if we look at the results of anger, we can say that in the immediate term, there is some benefit that follows from anger. We have things go our way, or we protect our body when we need to. But that benefit is fleeting. And it's fleeting in that, whilst in the moment we get things go our way, or we protect ourselves physically, and thereby things go our way, we strengthen our habituation to acting in a manner that even in this life doesn't bring happiness that lasts throughout this life. And then if you think from a perspective of karma, in our future lives, only far greater problems will follow. So for example, even in this life, when we have a reputation of not being a patient person, so just even an ordinary person, people will always be that little bit apprehensive about us, as we often are with others, knowing that the wrong facial expression, the wrong tone, the wrong choice of words will lead one to becoming upset. And if we have a reputation for being someone who's easily enraged, people will avoid us. They won't invite us. And then we add to this the perspective of cause and effect, becomes clear. Only suffering follows from anger. So through reflecting like this, we'll see that any temporary benefit that comes from an affliction such as anger really is fleeting. There is no long-term benefit, long-term in terms of this one life, and certainly not going beyond this life. Arya beings, on the other hand, with their profound wisdom, they see clearly that anger only harms the angry person and others. And in this and future lives, only misery follows from anger. Therefore, they have been training in cultivating love and compassion, knowing that in difficult circumstances, through successful training, should love and compassion arise, then the person will be able to act skillfully in a way that is beneficial both in the short and the long term for both themselves as well as others. So reflecting in this way, we come to realize through our wisdom that afflictions lead to actually no benefit, but rather virtuous qualities. These are what we need to cultivate. So that we conclude the third outline. So we started with when we looking first at the four observed objects of the close placement of mindfulness. So a way to divide all phenomena into body, feelings, mind, and phenomena. And then we looked at how to meditate on these objects, and we looked at that in terms of a general and a specific way to meditate, and within that the specific characteristics and the general characteristics, so a common and uncommon way to meditate, and within that the general and specific characteristics. And now we've looked at the purpose of this meditation, which, as we've seen, is to engage in the practice of the Four Noble Truths. Now we come to the fourth outline, that of the entity of the close placement of mindfulness. At the top of page 6, we have the definition or the entity of a close placement of mindfulness. An exalted wisdom, engaged in practicing a path, included in mindfulness and wisdom, having investigated the general or specific characteristics of any of the four, body, feelings, mind, and phenomena.
asa rangji chenyi ni ge da ne gongbar jeba so de di tian do ane rangge chenyi da ji chenyi ni ge jeba chen gongores dine gongores da gongba ina gongken ge lo di kan de she lam na de la mi she zhenbe yu de zhenbe jin zhenbe pa jin zhenba dang se zhenbe jin an de le she ge jeba che dine ge jeba chi go de zhenba de she rab gang rong dine ge zhenba de da gang rong le de zhenba nye sha se de dine ge gom de be kap ki chamba diang chamba nya sha re sherap diang chamba nya sha re da de gangrung gi du ba la go sa gangrung du ba la de inji minji da chamba ing go sherap gi ing go ma de chamba du ba la de chamba da de ni gom be ge chamba da sherap ni da chun de gi be sem na sem jung ga de chin na cha sang chamba nya sha re so sem na sem jung chamba nya sha de da zhenpa dan sherab ni de cun de juwe sem ju mangbo yorwa sem so sem je ane tu she da la so ba da mangbo sem ju gari na chasang da zhenpa sherab du ba res chisan deni ge deni du ba la yode korang ni na cun de juwe ge zhenpa da kaso sem ju gari chi me ne an de res an de yang gari yoso ne lam shu ki khenpa yin go res lam nge jung samba jema ma yin ba xie char bi ge ngejon sama joma mai bi simbi gi loji yin go re che lamju gi khenpa la do de ka rong gu du be lamju gi khenpa chenyi de sha de chenyi de la lam ken bala do ajesa deni ganung du ba zemi yingo mal ne de ganung du bi lam ju ken ba se ne ngejung samba jema mayin ba ke sawa ji ku kin deni simbi ge deni jema me be simbi ge jamba da sherap deni gu jeba ji kom de jamba da sherap de dan sunun ju wa de su cha sa da jamba nya sha re so da.
Let's look at it in brief, the definition of a close placement of mindfulness. An exalted wisdom engaged in practicing a path included in mindfulness and wisdom, having investigated the general or specific characteristics of any of the four, body, feelings, mind, and phenomena. So Gyälwa explains the definition in the order that is written in Tibetan. So you'll just have to pay close attention because it starts at the back. So first, the definition starts with the four observed objects, that of body, feelings, mind, and phenomena. So this is what one meditates on when engaging in this practice. And that we saw in our first outline. Then as we came to in our second outline, how to engage in this meditation, how to do this reflection. And we see that is through the general or specific characteristics. And then moreover, one engages in this through the utilization of mindfulness and wisdom. So with mindfulness and wisdom here, with these two mental factors, either mindfulness on its own or wisdom on its own can be considered a close placement of mindfulness. Moreover, whilst not specifically stating, there will be a number of mental factors also included, such as we've mentioned previously, stabilization, as well as others. They will be included here in the consciousnesses that are engaged in a close placement of mindfulness, whilst not specifically being mindfulness or wisdom, as well as the main mind that these mental factors accompany. So all of them are included in mindfulness and wisdom. And then lastly, we see that it refers specifically to an exalted wisdom. An exalted wisdom. That an exalted wisdom, a consciousness of a path, that is the practice of a close placement of mindfulness.
Lam shu maju said lam gula ki make said lam gula ki na lam shu ba sural. The lam gula ki chang ganza yu lam chasan lam shu ki kempa la gorwada. Lam se gula ki make karcha warasin ngejung samba chuma mai ba sida. Tarba de tokkudu sebe tarba doni samba de chuma mai be ki na lam gula ki ware. Chasan tama tarba tokkudu sebe ngejung samba topdige samba dema ka chuma mai be ki che dine chuma mai ba de simbi thone ma de jimba ya dongwe senpa ya xian liang dangi senbe samtong dongwe senpa de lam cha go re garsne ngejung samba chuma mai be simbi khenba wa khen simba je lam cha go re dang 제가 ngejung samba chuma mai ba ma ke ba ne pe ngejung gom che ngejung gom je ang de ngejung samba chuma ke che chuma mai ba che samlo tang gom ba ne ki tu ba che ki go ba che dene a chik ma gom ba ne nga rangxin yu ko nga shu ki ma tu ba ji ung gu ba ngejung samba rangxin ji ma ju nga shu ki ba de chuma mai ba se ne ka le ja mo je rangxin ji ki wa de la rangxin Gyälwa zele ko chuma mai je za di ro rangxin ji nga shu Gyälwa chuma mai gom gazam na thame ta jo lan gi na ne samdang lamsang ki de jung gu ba rangxin ji je da chuma se de chuma lab de na zo ka le ke samlo chi tang chik ta na de ski gyo ba che de sam ma da ji che ne ya ge ji sam ma da na ngang gi ma tu ba jung wa de so ni jung sam ba chuma wa se lue pa ju ne gom na ki gyo ba che ma lue pa sam ta ma gom ba na ki ma tu ba na chuma wa se de ni ngi jung sam ba chuma wa de ki chuma ma yin ba de ma ke ba che de ni ge chuma wa ki sa ji nga ju gi lue le sam ta rang ge ching yi sam da di ga le ji ching yi sam da de mi ta ba sam gom yo yo ro ba o di de jamba da shirip ni gom be ge jamba da shirip de ge ade ka so re jamba nya sha rebe lam na Jamanya Marella or Carson Lam Maresti, Carson Nijun Sabachuma may be Gio Mares. She's not called Lula Mine, Mipa Lula Mine, and Lula Mine, and Rangit singing the G singing Daniel Gompi, share up yours, Inaya dishet di Gompi share up to get Jamanya Mares. My became Jacarelana, Quigula Nijun Sabachuma may be Gio Mares. She's not Dinesa, Jamanya Mares. She's a Lamjuki Kemba, said Lago Gimsendiria.
We see right at the beginning of the definition, it says, an exalted wisdom, engage in practicing a path. What is then an exalted wisdom? An exalted wisdom, engage in practicing a path, refers to a practitioner, a yogin, who has generated a path in their continuum. Then what is a mental path? It is when a mental path is generated when definite emergence, this commitment to strive to definitely emerge from the suffering realms of samsara, has been generated, and that generation of definite emergence is uncontrived. This is a key word here, uncontrived. For definite emergence to be uncontrived means it needs to spontaneously arise. It should arise in a way that is not intentional. It is not intentionally cultivated. So one can have the consciousness of definite emergence, but it only arises through intentionally generating it. Then it is contrived definite emergence. For it to be a path, it needs to be uncontrived, spontaneously arise. Then, when one has this path of definite emergence, then when one engages in other practices such as generating generosity, and as well as the other minds such as ethical restraint, when they are conjoined with uncontrived definite emergence, that generosity is also a path. So again, generosity, ethical restraint, patience, and so forth, they are paths when conjoined with uncontrived definite emergence. So therefore, if someone engages in meditation on the general and specific characteristics of any of the observed objects, such as the body, feeling, mind, or phenomena, one would do so with mindfulness and wisdom. But it would not necessarily be a practice of a close placement of mindfulness, because that consciousness is not an exalted wisdom, a consciousness that hasn't engaged in a path, because it lacks uncontrived definite emergence. So again, someone who hasn't given rise to, someone who's engaging with mindfulness and wisdom in reflecting on the general or specific characteristics of an object, but that mindfulness and wisdom isn't conjoined with uncontrived definite emergence, it is not an actual close placement of mindfulness.
Lam Gyälwa Majewa, Lam Gyälwa Majewa Zugine, Lula Miche, and Lu Mi, Dene, Di to the Rangit in Chi Sing, Tana Combachewa Yungore, Semla Mina Combachewa Yungore, Ina, the Nigo Gombigi, Jambatan Sheraptiki, and Lula Miche, Lam Gyälwa Majewa, and Lula Mine, and the Rangit in Chi Sing, Tana Gombi, Sheraptan, Jambatan Sheraptiki, and the Jamanja Rivers and the Jamanja when it matters, that is so. The Jamanja Chitun Bash, Chitun Bas, the Dobush. When they my angle, Jamanja Chipa Dobu Inga, Mipada, Nambada, Chasan Dobu in the Gaje, when they my Bache, Chasan Jamanja Chitun Bas, Chitun Ba, the Dobush Chagre.
So therefore, someone who hasn't given rise to an exalted wisdom is someone who hasn't given rise to uncontrived definite emergence, and therefore do not have a path in their continuum. Such a person, of course, as we've heard many times, can engage in meditating on, for example, the observed object of the body through its specific characteristic and its general characteristics, and they will do so with mindfulness and wisdom. But those mental factors of mindfulness and wisdom will not be an actual close placement of mindfulness because of not being conjoined with uncontrived definite emergence. And therefore, that meditation can be called a similitude of a close placement of mindfulness, but not an actual close placement of mindfulness.
lam nyamlen jeje lam gyule ki cheng gyge ane lam gane simna chaza jambanye cha chagribe lana da ya samlo chilo chiza lam gyule ki chawa ina da lam gyule ki cheng gyge lam gane simna chaza jambanye cha rebe lamna 대야 잠만이 인거예요 말해서 그래. 얘네 람귤라 기에서네 때문에 가서 그래. 안 저기 동화 가서 샘제 탐제 동화다 다나 샘백이 인지고미하다. 샘제 탐제 대화다 되나 샘백이 잠바고미야 되게. 다 잠만이 제레벨라나 잠만이 자 말해서 그러다. 안에 다 아니 가르래스네 가르쳐고서네 샘제 가지고 동화 샘제 탐제 대화다 되나 선배 삼로디기 대화대 되나 삼바마도 데려 제바가 지고 말와 셰르비 제바스가 지고 말해 제바 마제바인자 지산 잠반 예제들라 젬비 유리지 데려 셰르비 제바지 그래서 지산 다데데 심전 가서 심리 대화대 되나 선배 삼로디 그 데랑 미제 지 삼바마도 데려 젬비게 진지 데려 셰르비 제바지가 차고 말해 인자 데려 잠만예자 이나 가서 랑지 천인이는 단의 공부하시고 진짜 랑게 천인의 지 천인이 단 심제 듬제 대화 되나 삼마마도 심전지 미다와 인바다 심전 탐지를 안에 다도 동화 인바 제바 가야지 그거 말 매반자 전에 전주심비 규기 심전 대화의 되나 심비 잠바데 안에 람레 이내 잠만예자 말해라고 하다.
For those who have cultivated a path in their continuum, are all their meditations an illustration of close placement of mindfulness? The answer would be no. Because let's take someone who has generated a path in their continuum and are now meditating on, for example, compassion. So they have given rise to they're meditating on the thought, may all sentient beings be freed of suffering and its causes. Or perhaps they're meditating on love, giving rise to the thought, may all sentient beings experience only happiness and have causes of happiness. So this is for them, it is a path in that is conjoined with uncontrived definite emergence, but is not a close placement of mindfulness. And the reason is, because whilst they have a path manifest in their continuum, the path of love, or the mental path of love, the mental path of compassion, they are not holding their object with mindfulness and investigating it with wisdom. They rather have given rise to the strong wish, may all beings be freed of suffering, or may all beings experience only lasting stable happiness. So here we have a path of compassion or the path of love in their continuum, but they are not investigating their object with wisdom. For it to be a close placement of mindfulness, the object needs to be held with mindfulness and investigated with wisdom, and moreover, needs to be done so through its specific characteristic, coming to realize the entity of the object, and the general characteristics, such as impermanence, suffering, and so forth. So therefore, such an illustration of love, of the path of love, the path of compassion, would not necessarily be a close placement of mindfulness.
다디 되네게 띵에 진데 잠반이 샤리벨라나 잠반이 샤고 마라 가라스네 네 디카스네 유 미바디 류레 미바레데 이나 류이 텐도 랑게 칭예 삼당 공고 마레 지 칭예 공고 마 지다 잠바다 샤라니기 잠베 칭 델야 류이티데 잠바 칭제 랑게 칭 지 칭이 따노 마곰바 인사 아니고 띵에 칭 신네디 람디 아니 람레데 이내야 그 가서 잠만이샤 말해서 거다.
Similarly, someone who has attained calm abiding, and perhaps a path too, if they, with their calm abiding, are holding as their observed object the body, and are holding it single-pointedly, and this single-pointed concentration certainly could be conjoined with uncontrived definite emergence, this would not necessarily be a close placement of mindfulness, because whilst they're holding the object with mindfulness, in this case, which has been developed to the point of being calm abiding, single-pointed concentration, and it could be conjoined with the path that is uncontrived definite emergence, because they are not also utilizing wisdom and investigating the specific and thereafter the general characteristics of the body, this meditation would not be classified as a close placement of mindfulness.
안디네 자다 디기 안저 잠반이자 천이 디게 가르하고 그것은 된다로 지망고 세부를 차고 두고래 랑지 천이 이게 따네 공부를 제바 라면도 랑지 천이 따네 마곰베게 람간데 신에 잠반이자 말에 사실 단 잼바다 셰럽 강르 뒤비게 람슈기 켐바 라면도 람마엔 켄기 아니 랑지 천이 따네 공부 집에 셰럽다 잼바 강르 뒤비게 이내 람마이나 잠반이자 말에 사실 나 안에 딱 가르에서는 루소 샘저 실라미네 랑지 천인이 따네 고메 잼베지 셰럽기 제바 지리베 갑기다 잼바다 셰럽 코로나다 잼바다 셰럽이 춘던의 주위에 되니게 셈나 셈죠 대소 잠만이 자리에 람용 오주바 대소 잠만이 자리에 사지 고고다.
Then in brief, if one is engaging in a meditation and not reflecting through it's the general and specific characteristics, or utilizing wisdom to investigate the object through its specific and general characteristics, it cannot be a close placement of mindfulness. Moreover, if one is investigating an object with wisdom through its specific and general characteristics, but one has not generated a path in one's continuum, that meditation is not conjoined with a path, it cannot be an actual close placement of mindfulness. So therefore, to be an actual close placement of mindfulness, one needs to have generated a path, and that path then, and that path, with that conjoined with that path, wisdom and mindfulness. Mindfulness needs to hold the object, and with wisdom, one needs to be investigating the specific characteristic or the general characteristics of the object. Then it will be a close placement of mindfulness. So all of these various points of the definition need to be accomplished for to be an actual close placement of mindfulness.
안다 잠반예샤 시 세베가도 잠반예샤 시 세베 슝나라야 잠반예샤 시 세베 잠반예샤 데라 데니신 고리에서 얼마도 지다야 잠반예샤라도 야지 지단에 잠반예샤라도 야 먹고야 여러 근데 잠반예샤 숨세야 숨세야지 야 잠반예 죽세야 되네 셔 거래 데니게 다된 안 저기 셔야 돼 잠반예샤 시 세야 돼 잠반예샤 시 세야 데니게 셔야게 다 시디 뭐디 간에서네 류다 참 라지 신이 단의 공부집에 전반에 시라 강의도 남시 캠바 되듯이 공부를 해서 그러다 전반에 시세 되는 시에 갑라 다양한 저기 전반에 곰세도 내가 지다는 저기 초반에 전반에 곰이야 람나 길레메제나 전반에 곰이야 사중고로 와 안디소야 안디소 말에 당한 저 다들 시에 가서 전반에 흉나려야 전반에 시세 시에게 전반에 시고르디 시세디 돈다 되는 시를 고고를 해서 그러다 요래 베지나라 담아요 숨세세 응고래 담아요 죽세다 하점바 최점바세데 몽고요르다 상지치수 점바 최지수 점바 기든지수 점바 동화지수 점바세 양 제제 되는 제전 몽고시야요 점바세.
Hopefully now it's through the presentation we've had over the last few months, as well as now looking clearly at the definition, it's clear what is meant by a close placement of mindfulness. But it must be emphasized that this is referring to the four close placements of mindfulness. In that, in other texts, the Buddha has taught close placement of mindfulness. The Buddha has taught 3 close placements of mindfulness, or 6 close placements of mindfulness. So this definition refers specifically to the 4 close placements of mindfulness. And so hopefully then that is clear, as well as that we are describing here the actual close placements of mindfulness, and this is quite different from what is described as a close placement of mindfulness in society, where one observes the body or feelings, and this may be called a close placement of mindfulness, but it should be clear that that is quite different from what is defined here.
ngō gāngshē nā, sīdā dāmbā nyēshē ngō gāngshē nā, dāmbā dā shērab dā dāmbā wō, sīdā dāmbā shī shēbē, dāmbā nyē shī dī ngō gāndā shīlē lāb nā, shērab dā dāmbā rē, sā shī dī sūngō rā, sīdā dā cīk nā lā, dī nā lā, cīk ngō sū shē kua shē, dāmbā nyēshē dī lā, yā nā shērab, yā nā dāmbā gō rē, sā shī, dāmbā dā shērab tsūndē nī yu chū lō dī kē gō gō mā rā, sīdā dōndā lā khā lā wā sī nā, ngō dī khā rā sī nā, 잠바다 셰랍 디니다 춘던의 주비게 셈셈 좀 차상 잠바니자 시 나는 셰 잠바니자들이 살고 거라.
And then we have a quotation from Asangha's Compendium of Knowledge. If it is asked what the entity of the close placements of mindfulness is, it is wisdom and mindfulness.
다 죄나라 가르송여서네 루비인이 잠바니샤 셰랍데스 지난 잠바니샤 세데 셰랍레스 그래서 지난 잠바니샤 세데 셰랍레스 말해.
Then a second quotation, this time from Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge. So the first was from the upper Abhidhamma, this is from the lower Abhidhamma. The close placements of mindfulness are wisdom.
지난단 죄나라 시도 지라마 홍원적이 지시인도 가르선 잠바니샤 세데 셰랍인고레스 마도 잠바다 차상 디코르도 주요 셈셈주 차상 잠바니샤 말에 잠바니샤 셰랍지부레스 지난데 셰랍지부네 콜 잠바니샤 라기도 안에 셰랍랍네 디기로 잠바니샤 말 셰랍랍네 디기도 알은 잠바니샤 라데 가르레라네 미바데라 잠비 진체 루소 셈저 시디 파 미바데 잠비 파진 잠비 진디베 잠비게 진비 미바데라야 셰랍게 제바 인자 디닉 제바 집에 셰랍데라 아니 ngō shirab tēdi inā dēli yā mīng jāmbā nyēshā stāvā rā kārāsān jāmbī kī yū jī dzīmbī kī jāmbī dzīmbī yū dēlā anā rāñchī cīñī yī tāni yō gōmbī shirab yīnzā kōla mīng jāmbā nyēshā stāvā rā mā tō jāmbā nyēshā sāyā lūsio sīm chūshī mīng rāñchī cīñī yī tāni yō gōmbī tāpī kī shirab tī rā shirab gōmbī shirab gōgō rā shirab tī rā sā 다 제라마 도지 발람나 리고 다 제가지 죄에 나 손에 디디 다 죄에 나 제라마 라신 리고 다 캬바 가시고 말 제라마 와디 숨고래.
So what we see in the Compendium of Knowledge is the same as what we've had expressed above, but in the Treasury of Knowledge it's expressed slightly differently, in that it's Vasubandhu has stated here that the close placements of mindfulness are wisdom. And then, of course, the question will come, well, why is it called the close placement of mindfulness if this practice is specifically or explicitly referring to wisdom? And that is because Vasubandhu goes on to explain that the observed object is apprehended with mindfulness and then investigated with wisdom. That's a different way of expressing the similar meaning.
근데 자다 그런저게 디 연체라 다 담만해야게 생이다 미바다 하는 검수되게 셰사바레 다 되네 연사다 그런저기네 다 되지 쇼게 셰바나시레 마주 류리아 삼다 아 류디 모어데 삼다 류리 모어디다 지게 뒤제 초비게 초네 줍디베지레 안 삼다야다 안 대양 아니 가르레라네 기지기지 지바 지베라신지레스 제사 지베라신지레 대다 니네레 지바 기지기지 미다바 삼다야 and the other Pumbody and Gudi Leda, Nyomo Balatine, Kidu by Inza, and Kidu by and Dunga Yirashi, Kawaduji, Dunga setting on the Pumbody Kawaduji, Dunga, Chezan Della Dene, and the Dunga Dunga, the Guru Dunga, Chazan Kitu Kigore, Chezan, the Lu Della Dene, Zugi, the Nyomo Batama, Kitikiwa Chimat Yeg, Liang Basagor, Dine, Zadan, Duchin, Donadu, some down, Kanjele, Dorduna, Karakugur Sene, that the Nigi, Ludi, Karis in the Chezan, Dunga Yirashi, Reshas, Chezan, Dunga Dele, the Targudu, says it Dunga. 지상아 동아에 동아야 유에 동아야 차상 류 델라트는 거 그래서 동아에 라시제도 지상 류데 동아게 코에 동아델레 동아델레다 타고도 와서 지상 디요야 규디 묘모 발레트니 기워 지상 알아서 삼로나나 묘모 바께 맞추지 묘모 바 가야디 빼마시 게침보레샤서 디가야게 또 달라 삼다데로와 디니 엔자다 묘모 바 가야디 가르삼 땅구레 랍나 다 류가 이숨요 거네 샬라 녀바 지금에 삼베 삼다야디 내가서 녀모바 가고르바 녀모바 샬라 뉘베 삼바 가고르바 제자다 소소랑랑기 강연 지용게 샬라 판바 류가 이숨다 되네 가르토네 샬라 판바 두게 소소게 샬라 로 지긴 삼베 삼다야도 소소게 녀모바 세나송야다 나 되네게 소소게 쇠베 샹게 뉘바 체바다 되네 파 콩로 균에 랑미아 삼베 랑준 라나 지금 말에 삼베 삼다야딩 안 쇠베 냠네 제체고 제자디 콩로 송고르와 콩로 송야다 당한 저기 계획 자와치를 주의할 빼면서 약보래다 되니저니까 즉 고합라와 빼막 보래스는 가부슈 진델레 돈이기 둔바께야디 아주 존중이면 지고래 디제바에는 아주 녀모발 레로다 디수 송고로와 디네 장한 저기 냠는지에디 디수 차고래 제가 룽아이 신여주 듬베 추름 송야 쇠바 검야 존주 좀야 진비 냠는지야래 되는 아주 저기 아직 양아직 삼로디 유 계획 최초라 미네야 제주도 내는 검지 등에서 즉 제주 내 투비하고 검야를 배치해야 안녕 저기 다 디제나 가는 연구도 디제나 야가 가는 디제나 두가 가는 연구도 나 저기 풍부되게 메타바 인비 김생 가래 가는 그 규단 끼는 뛰고 말에 마디어바지 뭐 랑고면도 두에 미두스는 디셔럽게 삼단 제바제바 차고로 안 두시는 가서 삼단 와데 안데 계신보 차 디레 제가 니네 삼단에 가지고 동화를 탈고도 탈비게다 탈바세도 토구도 샘비게 내가 탈바도니 삼단지 디토에게 된다랑 가지고 딱 계절 제대 배수치야 되다 가지고 잠만예자기 네 아주 신인 제비게다 아주 좀제를 마서 아주 제고해야 돼 니차고로 와 좀제 주비 제보 태매 타셔야 되는 세대 좀제 지도와 저로 받아 이제 안지 내가 좀제 매나 안 가야 맞나 좀 퇴해서 말 맞잖아
So as we conclude then this session, we have now covered the first 4 outlines. We first looked at the observed objects, we then looked at the way to engage in this meditation, and now most recently we've concluded the purpose of this meditation and the entity of, or the definition of the of close placements of mindfulness. The way then that I encourage you to do this meditation, we summarize the topics, but for ourselves, I think it's sufficient to focus on the observed object of the body, but to do this meditation in the way that encompasses the entire purpose of this meditation. So the body we reflect on first through its entity. So we see that it's comprised of the elements and the constituents of the elements, the elements and the composites of the elements. And then coming to recognize that this is the entity or the definition of the body, then engage in the general characteristics, reflecting first on its impermanent nature, that it changes momentarily, and therefore that it's not something that is reliable, it's not something that is going to last. And this, therefore, we must utilize this opportunity well. Thereafter reflect on it that it's suffering. In other words, it's in the nature of suffering. Here, primarily, one reflects on the reasons for this. We have attained this body due to the ripening of contaminated karma that was accumulated due to our afflicted minds. And the meaning of this is crucial, that because this body we have has come about due to the ripening of contaminated karma, and that karma is contaminated due to being accumulated under the influence of the afflictions. That this body is the basis upon which we will experience suffering. It is an illustration of all-pervasive suffering, the third type of suffering, and on this basis we'll experience the first two types of suffering, the suffering of physical and mental pain, and the suffering of transient happiness. Through reflecting then, we will come to see that this body is a basis of suffering because of the causes that led to it, its origin. So hopefully you're hearing this explanation, this summary presentation, true sufferings, true origins. And therefore, we need to abandon the origins, the afflictions, because it's these that keep us suffering. What we desire is freedom from this, a state of cessation. So how to achieve this? We need to recognize the role that these thoroughly afflicted phenomena, these afflictions play in our lives, and that they need to be eradicated. They serve no good. There is no purpose, no useful purpose of these afflictions other than causing us to remain bound in the suffering realms of samsara. And therefore we must abandon them through cultivating their antidotes, their completely pure phenomena. Here we reflect on that minds such as attachment and miserliness serve to cause us to suffer, and others thereby to suffer too, and cause others to suffer too. Therefore we must cultivate antidotal minds such as generosity. Moreover, minds such as anger cause us to suffer, and thereby others to suffer too. So we must cultivate their antidotal minds, and these will include ethical restraint as well as love and compassion. Moreover, we need to cultivate patience, to keep our minds spacious in the face of adversity, and cultivate joyous perseverance to overcome the afflictions such as laziness. Take delight in our opportunity here to cultivate virtue. And whenever we notice an affliction arising and we overcome it, cultivate delight so as to ensure we persevere in our training. Moreover, we cultivate single-pointed concentration through using placement meditation in the way that has been described in previous talks, where we develop familiarity with what we have meditated on by abiding on it, placing our mind on it, and thereby strengthen our mental factor of stabilization or concentration. Lastly, we cultivate wisdom through the process of investigating. So through investigating first the specific characteristic of the body, thereafter the general characteristics of impermanence and suffering, and through reflecting on generosity and ethical restraint, patience and joyous perseverance, we're cultivating wisdom, the mind of analysis, of investigation. So through this whole process, we're seeing that liberation is possible through this process of cultivating the antidotes. So this here is a far more, it's an approachable manner that we can engage in cultivating the noble truths of true cessations and true paths. So this is the way I encourage you to engage in this meditation.
약불에 삼바다 가오금이라고 차고로와 아니 당한 저기 녀비기 좀들에 가르 중요해 줘 말 삼다베 내가 수 삼다베나 아 저기 잠반녀시 시 디고량은 좀 마신이라 먼저 가르 삼던 거 잠반녀시스도 남기네 지게 텔야 지게 류리미체 안 가야 마삼바체 지게 텔야 셈지부 지고 데랑 지고랑 삼다야디 마도 잠반녀시 고미야디 직 데네시마서 삼고 말와 다 데네기 다장아 잠반녀 시고시도 오다 잠반녀시 람용오 규베 잠반녀시 사디 디 내가 넘기는 아도 지소나 잠반녀시 고미야서 디 직보 레미도와 다 잠반녀시 곰다 데네시 람주기 냠는 제한줄 잠반녀시 사디 리글 마손의 이완 마손의 시도와 사다 대수의 유디게 데네데레 미기도와 유디디리도 다 미비 니네 제바 제당 가르 치고선 렘베진네 제바 가르치고서 랑게 챙이 지챙이 세다 되네 제바 지도와 다 랑게 챙이 가래 지챙이라도 지챙이네 미다바다 동어와 동와 다음에 봐 때디네 제바자 디나데 다음에 봐세 지상 다음에 발에 미세 렘베진 셔라기 제바지 디네 고메데 다 나주기 가서 제바지도 뇽몽베 녜보조 어디 차기도 와 선비기 디니스데 샤사 지가 저기 하고고를 지사 디니상 마우줄야 니스 사바 망무 신여 다가지 신버 지사 디니 신버 되는 저기 마니마 마신버 디니스 망고 신여디 먼저 연대로 와다 연대 사바 깨와로 다가지 나 디니자 니다 디니기 마우줄 사바 깨와데 간스 하고고를 람나 디니기 니스 니 만용하다 신경도 기시도 다디 잔다디 니 만용하자 디고셔 메르와다 지단당 아주 니 뇨아 롭셔요보다 어디디다 대담만 이제 디네디 디잠 말에 디네 담만 이제 디네지요 제가 류담만 심네 최담만 이제 담만 이제 시시야 요르다 디스미바 디네 미고르다 검나 디네 공고르다 아니 저기 두신 차사시야로 디 차사신바디다 대신예라 마신바래 마신바자 딩아조 마지 딜로조 마지예라 마신바래 저 몽바래다 몽바차도 낙돔도 차도 지간에 미기시다 하고 마서 셋마드 메르바 다 몽바디 지당 백 코로나도 장마상에 체마 길게 와래데 디디 마래데 이네 몽바 갈라강섬 세차래 지다 디니서 강섬 질려 어디디디디디 디네 요르세 디니 시야 요르지 시소수기나 소스셈날 디디디 요르세 배 삼로 시 삼로나 용구래 요바자 시안에 시에바네 시쇼쇼다 디네 강함에 차이고로 디네 인자고 아주 연den게바 사와 게와라 저는 디네 삼다면 소수기 니네니네리 년비게다 롭종 제비게 연den 요바디 세부라지 하고 라트야데 디네 인자 아주 디네게 지게 샘슈 게야다 디네게 다 로지게 dumba ane dunye cherroya da dine zang azu dine shinbaina drama nyejongwe ki ding azu lia ta nyen rugo wa ta nyen rugo re jisan dine za tarba da tamje himbe go ba to be ta nyen rugo wa jisan dine za azu ki dine ki gawa ko mo da boba ki wa di che le sha san be odu si do
The couple of months that you've been hearing teachings now on the 4 close placements of mindfulness, you've heard a lot about this practice. And you've heard the great benefit that comes from being able to actually generate a close placement of mindfulness in one's continuum, the great purpose that comes from this. And hopefully you've been engaging in meditations too, observing the body, investigating the body through its specific and then its 4 general characteristics. And you've seen now how very different this practice is from the way mindfulness is generally presented in society. So I encourage you to generate joy right now for this gathering of knowledge, because you've come to understand what is an actual practice of mindfulness. It is an actual practice of mindfulness, as is understood in the way that is presented here, is it's engaged in someone, in the continuum of someone who has cultivated an actual mental path, an exalted wisdom in their continuum, and mindfulness is practiced together with wisdom. Sometimes just mindfulness, sometimes mindfulness and wisdom together. And the way wisdom is utilized is through investigation of first the specific characteristic of the object, and then the general characteristics. And amongst the general characteristics of impermanence, selflessness, empty, and selflessness, it's primarily selflessness, the cultivation of the wisdom realizing selflessness or the wisdom realizing emptiness. This is the primary meditation here. So this perhaps was largely unknown to you before, and now it has become known. So where in this area there was just the darkness of confusion, now that has been illuminated by this gathering of knowledge. And this is something to rejoice in, this is something to take great delight in, because to the extent that you've seen the benefits of engaging in these meditations based on the knowledge that you have gathered, you are developing within yourself spiritually. Thereafter, to the extent that you are able to engage in these meditations based on this knowledge that you are now acquiring, to that extent, you will develop further spiritually. So I encourage you to take this knowledge, learn it well, and integrate it through reflection, through meditation, because this is the process that the darkness of confusion, that ignorance that is the lack of knowledge, is dispelled. And then the ignorance that is not only a lack of knowledge, but the ignorance of reality starts to be dispelled. And this is how, even for ourselves, who have not yet generated an exalted wisdom, who are not yet capable of engaging in an actual close placement of mindfulness, we can engage in a similitude of it. So delight in this possibility that has come your way through the causes you yourself have accumulated. Delight in this, and then utilize this knowledge that you have gained through learning it well and integrating it within yourself, and through knowing the great benefits that will come from this. Set for yourself as the objective, through integrating this knowledge, through meditating on what I've learned, I aspire to give rise to these realizations in my continuum, so that I can share this knowledge with others, help others dispel their darkness of confusion through my knowledge, through my realization that will come about based on this knowledge. And then I will be ready to help others eliminate their darkness of confusion. So here, generate joy in yourself, and thereby a strength of mind, that through this knowledge and this dispelling of darkness, you are approaching the generation of an actual path in your continuum, an actual exalted wisdom, and thereby be able to now be engaged in a similitude of a close placement of mindfulness, and later in an actual close placement of mindfulness. And thereby, liberation and enlightenment comes ever closer. So thank you. We'll conclude here then for this week, and next time we'll come to the next division, that of the divisions, where the boundaries are that one engages in the actual close placements of mindfulness. So thank you very much.